Welcome to Meet the Author, where you can join in on insightful conversations with best-selling and award-winning indie published authors. Your hosts today are Rob and Joan, who themselves are indie published authors, book publicists, and paranormal investigators with Tampa Bay Spirits, based in Tampa Bay, Florida. Thanks for dropping by. And now, on with the show.
Hi, I'm Rob.
And I'm Joan. We're glad that you're here with us tonight, whether you're watching us live as a podcast or if you're listening to us on a podcast. We're really glad that you're in the audience. Remember, we love for you to share and to like and to comment. We love those comments. Keep them coming.
Yep. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel too as well. We're struggling on that, on the volume, on the ticker there. But we'll get there one of these days. I want to remind everybody to tune in after this show for the Voice of Indie podcast on blogtalkradio.com with host Beam Weeks and Stephen Gary G's. And that's going to be on every Wednesday after our show. And episode rewind's coming up too. This coming Saturday, November 12th, episode 50. Stephen Gary G's is one of the guests. He is the guest. So he's the one from the Voice of Indie podcast. So that was a good episode. Next Wednesday, live is author and publisher C.J. Peterson. I'm going to welcome her and talk about the publishing company and all of her books that she has available. And that'll be episode 83, believe it or not. So, shall we bring in our guest for tonight?
We should, and I just want to remind you again, this is a pre-recorded program.
Yes.
So we will try to watch when it's on so that we can answer some of your comments, but, it won't be the same. You won't see it coming up as you usually do.
Right. And we will. There is a book giveaway during this show. If you're watching this later after the live stream, or
go ahead, give it a shot.
Yeah, or listening to it a day or two later, you don't know whether it's going to be given away yet, so you could still win a book from Tom. So we'd like to welcome Tom Stewart now to our show, and come on in, Tom. Hi.
Hey guys. Hey Joan and Rob. Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's great.
Thank you for being on our show. Do you want to tell people where you are?
I'm in Tofino, Vancouver Island. So that's the extreme west coast of Canada. Population about 2,500 in the wintertime. And in the summer, it explodes to 10 times that amount with all the tourism, because we have lots of whale watching, and we are a premier surf destination in Canada. And it's a beautiful spot that I'm just lucky to call home.
No kidding.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place to live for sure.
So is the volume of people kind of ebbing now? Is it kind of diminishing?
Yeah, it definitely is. It definitely peaks those summer months, summer vacations. But there is still some draw with storm watching because the seas can be spectacular in the wintertime. And the surfing picks up in the winter with the big swells. So it'll trail off, but it's more constant now than in years past because every year it's more renowned, there's more marketing, and everything keeps getting built out. Like they do cuisine so well here. So it keeps drawing people a bit more each year. And that quiet season is a little less quiet every year. But yeah, it's a wonderful spot.
It sounds like that'd be a real inspiration for a writer to be in that environment.
It definitely is. I kind of have a privileged little spot here because I'm oceanside, and I'm lucky to have my boat in the bay, and I go free diving and spearfishing just off my property. I see whales and all the sea life and the storms. So yeah, those scenes populate my mind, and you get to use them in stories that I'm trying to write. So yeah, it's a nice spot to call home, that's for sure.
Well, we know what your background is, but the audience doesn't. You want to give them a quick synopsis of your background, and then maybe you could segue into why you decided to become an author.
I have a pretty varied background. I was in university for a couple decades ago, taking literature and philosophy. But I didn't see that as a career path. I wasn't sure I wanted to become a teacher. So I did drop out of university, and then I worked in the north of Canada. I was a fishing and hunting guide for 8 years. I worked on the oil rigs in northern Canada. I flew small float planes, little bush planes, landing on water in remote spots for a few years. And then, strangely enough, I played poker very competitively, online poker for almost 9 years. And so that's what brought me out to Tofino, was that Tofino is one of the only places you can fly float planes year round in Canada, because it doesn't freeze over because of the ocean, the harbor. So I couldn't fly in the interior anymore. I came out here and applied, but back then, the town being smaller, they only kept a pilot or two on staff in the wintertime. I went back to central Canada, to Winnipeg. I played some poker that was kind of transitioning to, it was sort of paying the bills. There was an edge there. And kind of poker started working out that it kind of took off, and I put flying in the back seat. And then I realized I could do that anywhere. And I liked Tofino so much when I did come out to visit. I wanted to surf and enjoy it out here. So I moved out this way and kind of set up shop and ended up playing online poker for a number of years. And I never went back to flying, and ended up calling Tofino home.
Oh, are you no longer have your pilot's license?
No, I flew just 3 years. It was something I did because I didn't have a natural passion. I always admire those that do, that always know they wanted to be a writer, they wanted to be a doctor or teacher, but I never had that. So I went into flying because in those remote jobs, those bush planes were always around us, and the pilots seemed to like their job. But it was something I did because I couldn't think of much else that really appealed to me. So I did enjoy it, but it was never a calling, it was never a passion. And so when poker took off, I kind of let the flying lapse, and no regrets over that, because it's a, there's not much money in it. It's challenging. It's dangerous, those small planes. And but
it fills an important need.
An important role.
Yeah,
absolutely.
In Alaska and Canada.
Yeah, both.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Rob's a retired air traffic controller.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, yeah. It's, it's vital because of all the small communities, not just for recreation, but a lot of isolated communities. And it's it's necessary. And it's good that there are people that love to do it.
There's medical reasons for using it, and also bringing in supplies to people. I know that some of his friends are still air traffic controllers up in parts of Alaska that they only have bush pilots. Nobody else can get in there. And so they bring in their supplies all the time.
Yeah. And there were some beautiful aspects to it. Like, at times I would drop off my guests and my load, and I'd be flying by myself in the middle of northern Canada with no other planes, no air traffic controllers or landing strips. You're choosing where you want to land, where you want to set down your plane. I could even plug in music to my MP3 player headset, and I was listening to music. I was flying around over the trees. At times it was stunningly beautiful. So yeah, I did enjoy it for those years.
That's nice. What then brought you, actually, when we get to giving out your website and your email, it explains your website and email address. And people, you'll find out what I mean shortly here. But what then led you to decide to write, become an author?
I've always highly respected writing as a craft. I have always read heavier literature before I could really understand it. Reading the Russians. That's kind of all I read, is the heavier stuff, and all of Hemingway. So it's always something that's been in the back of my mind when I was very young, and then I only started writing a few years ago. But it was something that I always kind of felt calling. And I transitioned from poker, and I had all these stories of these situations that I lived, experience that I had, some of the near-death crashing experiences, and the wild animals, and the remote situations, and people under duress sometimes. And I thought they were stories that other people might appreciate. And so it was just a very humble start in my first book, a memoir of short stories of things that I've seen. And I wasn't entirely sure if other people would want to read that or not. So I ended up looking for an editor, I sent emails to perhaps 100 editors in Canada, looking for one that I resonated with, that I thought we could vibe with, and eventually found one that seemed like we were kind of on the same page, and she thought they were absolutely worth sharing, and that there's a lot of humanity on the pages, and it went from there. And it's really nice to say that the reception of that first humble collection of short sort of Canadiana stories has been quite nice, and it's really motivated further efforts.
Well, let's show people what we're talking about here. This is Under Big-Hearted Skies, which is your memoir.
Yeah, a young man's memoir of adventure, wilderness, and love. And so I published that in 2020.
Awesome. Very awesome. And I like your cover too.
The title is cool.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, the title is really cool.
It speaks.
It does speak.
I find the cover design process is fun because there's companies online you can work with multiple different designers, and you can get feedback and iterate, and so you're not just working with one creative designer. Maybe you found someone that you really like, but it's really fun to see all the varied submissions, and you can kind of silo them off, the designers from one another, so you're getting independent ideas, and then you just iterate with the different designers. And at the end, I had about a dozen titles, covers that I really liked, and I held a poll with 30 friends, and then we narrowed it down to 5 and further narrowed it down to this one. And I just think that the curl of the leaf, it's showing some darkness in the shadows. I think there's a little telling aspect to that, but all the light at the center, I think the artist did such a beautiful job on this. And
for people who can't see, who are just listening to the podcast, what he's talking about is it's a dark colored cover, all right, like a dark gray, almost, would you say charcoal gray? And then there's a very bright orange maple leaf that's a fall leaf. Looks that you would see in the fall.
Beautiful autumn leaf. Yeah.
And then, as he said, Under Big-Hearted Skies is then printed on top of the leaf. And then you see the leaf curling, as he said, and underneath that, it's black. It's not just
you can see the shadow of the leaf.
You can definitely see the shadow of the
stem
leaf.
And the
So
good point. Good point to describe it for those that can't see it. Thanks, Joan.
Oh, sure. But it's really neat because it speaks a lot, I think, and it looks like 3D because of the shading and everything and the shadowing under that. Let's go ahead. It gives
character to the skies, and you have big skies up there,
Definitely.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a pilot, and you've been flying, you're in the sky,
Yeah, there's a lot packed into that title and that cover, I think, at once. So I got lucky with the designer.
For sure.
I agree. Well, you chose the right one, didn't you? You've had a lot of experiences in the sky, and all of our listeners are going to know what I'm going to ask next. Did you ever see a UFO?
No, I definitely did not see anything. And I've worked in a lot of remote places in northern Canada and fly in access only, up in the night flying, and I haven't seen anything like that. But then also I've, in those cabins in isolated middle of nowhere by myself, where, I can remember one year it was when Blair Witch Project came out, and I made the mistake of watching half of it up there. I didn't finish it because I was freaked out. And then I'm by myself in like those cabins that had been built 60 years ago. And there is paranormal, there are ghost stories up there, like pretty legitimate ones of people seeing the same phenomenon that didn't know of the story coming into it. And I was just hoping I would not see that. I would not experience that by myself, because that would totally freak me out. So, but no, there are stories up there. I was not one of the witnesses.
Okay, cool.
We, as you know, investigate paranormal things. So
we do our best to debunk everything. So
you want to debunk first. You want to go in with a skeptic's eye and not see a ghost under every rock and behind every coffee pot. But there's this one
Lady in White is the name of this ghost story that has been around since the 60s or 70s up in this northern lodge, fly and fishing lodge in northern Ontario. And it's this phenomenon has been around long enough, and people that don't know the story coming in mostly American tourists coming into this Canadian fishing lodge have seen this phenomenon of just a lady all in white kind of moving out of a cabin or moving at night, and there's no one that fits that description working up there. It's limited staff, so the story's been around for a while. I'm always curious of what's behind that, and but no, I never saw it.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of things, and we've been able to document them on video or on a digital recorder or something like that. But I still think that you need to see to believe, because
Right.
you
really
can't
be
trust
sure,
anything nowadays. It could always be faked. And we know that what we've seen and heard hasn't been faked, but the viewer or the listener doesn't know that. So, but when you do have an experience, then you know.
Right.
Yeah, I would echo my mindset as well, is that I'm agnostic, or perhaps I do probably believe in something paranormal, just because of how many people and personal, credible, sober friends that have seen, multiple friends have seen situations like that. So I would lean towards it, but it's all, like you say, Joan, it's one of those things that a person probably has to see firsthand.
Yeah, I mean, I think you do, because we watch everything with a skeptical eye, and we do it all the time, but still we don't believe everything we see. Let me just put it that way.
Why don't we go ahead and do our first commercial break, and when we come back, we'll talk about your novel.
His novel, not
Immortal.
a memoir.
Right, Immortal North.
Okay.
Okay, so everybody,
just a word from our sponsor. Don't go away, folks. We'll be right back.
Right. Stand by. Don't go away.
Welcome to Magnolia Bluff, Texas, a small town in the heart of the Texas Hill Country near Burnett Reservoir. A town where everyone's business is discussed at the local coffee shop. A town where neighbors look out for each other. A town not insulated from murder and mayhem. Which begs these questions. Who is responsible for breaking into quaint Victorian homes? And how are poodles, ghosts, drug cartels, and a Ponzi scheme connected with a serial killer? Caroline McCluskey, the town's librarian, catalogs books using the Dewey Decimal System. When a black and white poodle puppy arrives unannounced, she calls him Dewey. Now, Caroline must catalog events to identify a serial killer in her town. Pick up your copy of the Dewey Decimal Dilemma, now available on Amazon.
They thought the siren was dead. In the novel Siren Song by author George Dismukes, James Harmon shot her twice. Several people saw her dead body sinking slowly into the abyss. But now, in Siren Song 2, evidence suggests that she may still be alive.
She killed that boatload of people. It was her! And she's just getting started!
Angie, that's impossible.
The cold chill up my spine tells me it's not impossible. We've got to start all over again. And this time, do it right.
Siren Song 2. The story continues. Available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and many other bookseller websites. Get your copy today.
Hello, we're back. I've got to say, those were both really good commercials, and I just finished reading Siren Song, though at the time of this episode, I will have finished it a long time ago. And it's really, really good. It's a very good book. And the same with the Dewey Decimal. Good things.
Yep. But let's talk about Tom's book.
I think that's a good idea. Let's talk about this book, Immortal North. And this is a novel. And you want to explain this cover for our listeners who can't see it?
Yeah, the cover, again, I held a design contest and worked with a bunch of graphic designers, and it's a bird's eye view, which was a unique submission. It was the only one that was a bird's eye view, and it's of a northern forest in the wintertime. So it's predominantly white, and you could see these pine trees covered in snow pockmarking the cover of the book. And there's a small footstep trail down the center diagonally with a little spot of blood in the middle.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah, there you go.
Yes. And Immortal North is in blood red too. So
Yeah, that's true. The colors of the blood in the center match the colors of the title.
I noticed.
Yeah, there was a dozen covers that made it to the final round, and then this one and another one tied in first place. And it was so fun seeing the votes of friends come in. I love that part of it. And I've written a sequel to Immortal North, and the one that tied Immortal North will be the cover for the sequel. So I'm excited to share that one too, to reveal it later with friends and family and some readers.
So Immortal North has a sequel coming out. Do you know when it will be coming out? You want to give people an idea?
Yeah, when I wrote Immortal North, I actually had no plans for it to be a series, for it to have a sequel. And I don't want to say anything about the ending of it for readers that haven't read it. But to me, the tale felt unfinished, and there was something lurking there that I wanted to work on. And so it wasn't the plan, but I just started writing it. The story came really, really quickly. And so anyways, I worked on that for 6-7 months, and I sent it to my editor last Friday, and she had it for 3 days. And then I write 6 days a week. I take Sunday off. Sunday, I was in my favorite cafe, 8:30 in the morning, had a cappuccino and a croissant, and email came in, and my editor read the manuscript in 3 days and just said some really, really good things about it, which is, when a person spends so much time on a project and the first person to read it says something very positive, that's it's the great feeling. So it'll probably be out within 3 months, and then I'll be excited to share it with people. I feel very strongly about it.
So either by the end of the year or first of next year.
More likely January 2023. Yes.
January 2023.
Okay.
Cool.
That's
Cool.
a good time.
We won't hold you to that. We know how things go.
Yes.
But
I'm really motivated, dedicated to work on it. It means a lot to me.
What's it? Have a working title.
The title is Immortal North 2: Dead Myths and Broken Legends.
Ooh,
Dead
cool.
Myths and Broken Legends. That's very,
right.
very
That
intriguing.
sounds awesome.
It does.
Makes you want to read it.
Yes, it does.
That's what it's
I
supposed
think
to do.
that's the point.
Getting something right then.
There you go. There you go.
That's great.
So can you tell us a little bit about Immortal North without giving any, zingers away on it? And then maybe you would want to read a little bit out of it. That'd be great.
Sure, I'd love to.
Give us a little taste test here.
Immortal North, it's set in the isolated North. A father raises his boy to live within the woods, where the beauty and nature and harshness of nature doesn't stop at the border of the skin, until one fateful day that woodland life is violently broken. Shouldn't those guilty of such injustice be held to account? Immortal North.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
So it's one man's journey, would you say?
There's family aspects to it, and it's a father raising his boy. So no, it's not just one's man journey, but I hesitate to say too much and reveal too much of the plot. But
right.
I would happily read a page from it, as you suggested, Joan.
That's a really good idea.
I'm going to read one page here.
Okie doke.
Perfect.
Headlamps lit their way through the forest. Dave was thinking about the face he'd seen. A part of him wanted to believe that maybe his mind had just played a trick on him, just some weird imaginative slip, some one-off hallucination, and those things are probably more common than you think, that part told himself. About midway on their return, the trees were sparse, and above him, the canopy of branches receded, showing the winter night sky. Jacob was leading, and Dave called out to him, saying, "Hold up a minute." He had switched off his headlamp and stopped trekking and stood there in the snow. Jacob turned and saw that he was shielding his eyes from the light beam he was casting, so he switched his off too. Dave said, "Look." Jacob followed his upward gaze. Above them, a patch of star-pocked sky. The flurries must have been carried on high currents because they floated down from that cloudless circle and so looked less like snow and more like thin shards of chipped stars, some kind of astral dust. And the light that shined in the prisms of the whirling flakes dazzled the air around with no less brilliance than what shone from above, the essence of one, a particle of the other, and it seemed they are now floating among stars falling about you.
That's beautiful.
Oh, thank you very much.
I love that.
Thank you.
That was really awesome. We really like to stargaze, so I mean, I could really see that.
Yeah.
We haven't always lived in Florida.
I'm trying to, I'm trying to do like contrast scenes and themes when I write. So that scene of placidity comes after a scene of a much more aggressive nature. I kind of try to pair those things, those opposites in writing. So it's fun to juxtapose, the coarse and the polished. So just a little bit more color on that scene.
Well, actually, that brings me to some questions that I know our audience always likes to ask. And since they're not here to ask, I will. And you know what I'm going to ask. Well, no, that maybe you don't.
Maybe.
The first thing I'm going to ask is, do you like to follow a hero's journey, that writing style?
In some regards, this Immortal North does have elements of that, without a doubt. But for me, I think a lot of rules of writing, a lot of blueprints there's too much put behind them, and that there's a lot of different ways to tell a story. And there's all these rules like show, don't tell, and describe, don't explain, and what's the hero's sacred flaw, write a dream, lose a reader. There's all these rules that come up that part of me just wants to just rebel against and write the opposite of what people say them to do it, because it's like, just don't tell literature, don't tell the craft what to do. So I always revert back to my own number one rule, and that's just move a reader. And how I try to do that is by moving myself. These adages that like other rules of writing, they get repeated a lot, but I think they are foundational for me. Sit there and bleed. I think there's a lot to that. Sit there and open up a vein. Put yourself at risk. So like, I find that these are more foundational to what I'm trying to do than does the climax come in the middle, and
right.
does the hero come away changed? I think a better question is, does the reader come away changed?
Yeah.
So I have a skewed sense to some of these really common rules.
I know that I recently finished a book, and I read the acknowledgments by the author after I'd finished reading the book. And actually the acknowledgments, and Rob will tell you this is the truth, brought me to tears. I was trying to read to him the acknowledgments, and that actually brought me to tears. Right. The whole book had been like that. I had been emotionally involved with every character in the book for their whole journey in that book. And then to have the author speak personally and still be able to evoke emotion, I mean, I was blown away. I said, that's amazing.
What kind of things were in the acknowledgments?
About personal experiences through the COVID. She lost her husband during that time, how she felt and how she coped with that. And then she acknowledged all of the people that had helped her and what they had meant to her, who had helped her along the way. It just, moved me to tears, really. And it was so sincere and so real,
Yeah, that's like it. Sometimes I find the forward of the book has as much meaning to me as the rest of the book. Like I read Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace, and it really wasn't my thing, and it's a tome, it's a huge novel, and I kind of just wanted to read it to see what the hype was. But the forward by, I think it was David Eggers, where he talked about why someone would do so much and give so much to it. I remember that kind of more than the story of Infinite Jest. And so, we're just trying to render humanity and connect to another person, whether that comes, like you said, Joan, in the acknowledgments or the forward or the very middle of the book. And I think to me, that's the name of the game, is connecting with readers, with one another, So yeah, it's anywhere it can happen, on the cover or wherever.
I like getting lost in books. I like reading the book and being there with all the characters. That's what I really like.
Mm-hmm.
And if a book can do that, I'm a happy person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let me ask a question here to you. Have you ever, or would you ever consider writing like science fiction, or in another genre like science fiction?
I've got a collection of short stories that I just have for free, and I here and there, when I write a new one, I add it to that, and it's on my website that can be downloaded. And I have one story in there that's futuristic. It's sci-fi and futuristic. It's about AI developing to a state that, how much do I say without ruining the plot? Or maybe I just ruined the plot. It eradicates humanity, but it gets to a point that it keeps developing, and it hits a state of realizing how powerful and supreme love is, and it ends up regenerating humanity, and the idea of an ongoing process of one competing against the other but bringing the other back. And it's I promise it's much more eloquent than I'm describing it now. But yeah, so to me, it's like I used to always say literary fiction. I'm trying to write literary fiction because that's like the domain of truth and beauty. But I think it makes more sense to not always classify everything. And I think any genre done at its highest level is literary fiction. You can have it in it if it's a Western or if it's a romance, as long as it's conveying the strongest emotions and the prose is beautiful. You get these things together, then I think it transcends genre, and then it just becomes that work of art. So that's what I want to write, the work of art, regardless of its category. And I'm just working hard to try to do that, and studying, and just giving this my full effort. So that's what I'd love to achieve.
Cool.
And I think all of us right now are very interested in AIs. As a matter of fact, it was
frustrated with them. Huh?
It was the discussion at dinner last night about how AIs are, obnoxious on your phone, on your smartphone. They constantly change the words that you're writing.
Or your not so smartphone.
Not so smartphone.
Or the customer service when you're calling in to solve a problem, or like the chat boxes where they keep suggesting the thing that you just don't want. Yeah.
It is so annoying. And so then that whole conversation evolved into, so let's say we have an AI android, and now we've created something that can lift an automobile with one hand, and we've given them thought processes and a body to go around and do things with. How smart is that really?
Yeah.
I mean, we've all seen the Terminator. We know how that ends. So, but now it's like close to being a reality. So I really enjoy reading AI things, and think I started reading them way back when with iRobot many years ago. So
there's even been attempts of AI to write fiction. I've seen that. I haven't read the story, but I know they're creating art, and they have tried writing a fiction story. So I've heard it's a little discoordinated. But who knows? We'll see what's coming.
Yeah, elephants create art too. So I'm not sure. We can pretty much call anything art. Say, this elephant painted this painting. And you're like, okay. It's not the Mona Lisa, I'm telling you that. Let me put up some of your let's see. Let me give some of your information away here for readers. See, now this makes sense now, doesn't it, people? His website is luckydollarmedia.com. And as you heard Tom say, he was a professional poker player.
And the story is actually even goes further back than that. My grandpa, one of the grandpas that I didn't meet, he had a butcher store in a small town, Stonewall, Manitoba, and it was called Lucky Dollar Store.
Ha!
There you go.
Oh.
The title going, and then yes, I made my dad and I these aprons with the title on the front. When we I hunt deer, so when we butcher deer in the fall, we get to use the same title that was on his dad's store, and then it's also my publishing.
I love that.
Interesting.
That's wonderful. Paying homage to your grandfather.
That's right.
Really wonderful. So that's luckydollarmedia.com, and that's luckydollarmedia. And I'm sure that you can find lots of good information on that. You can also find Tom on Goodreads at Tom_Stewart, and that's TOMSTEWART. Of course, an underscore in the middle between Tom and Stewart. Now, do you want to get right into the book giveaway?
We can do that, sure. Yeah.
Okay. Let's tell people his email address, again, is luckydollarmedia@gmail.com.
Okay, and the book giveaway for y'all is the first 2 people to email luckydollarmedia@gmail.com will win either a paperback, and that's only Canada or the U.S. For the paperback, or an ebook. And would that be of choice or of Immortal North or...
Let's go of choice. Whatever the reader would like to read, that's what I'm going to send them.
Perfect. So don't forget, this is a pre-recorded show. And so go ahead and, you're listening to this a day or two later or watching it on YouTube. Go ahead and enter, go ahead and send type it in there, luckydollarmedia@gmail.com. You might be a winner. You never know.
Yeah, and don't forget that there will be a sequel.
Right.
Sometime in January of 2023. Mm-hmm. Let's hope 2023 is a much better year for all of us.
Let's hope so.
Yeah, we've had a few hard years here.
Okay, we're going to take this down. We're going to take a little break now for our second set of commercials. We'll bring this back up when we come back for the so that you can enter. Okay.
Don't go away.
Don't go away, folks.
At Indie Book Source, you can shop by genre or by author, and you will be buying direct from the author's main purchase link. We offer hundreds of titles in formats that include ebooks, paperback, hardbound, and audiobook. Support an indie author. Visit indiebooksource.com today.
Live every Wednesday, your Voice of Indie hosts Beam Weeks and Stephen Gees welcome authors, musicians, publishing industry pros, artists, and assorted creative guests for an exciting interactive hour. Call in during the show or post questions and comments on Twitter for responses in real time. Meet your favorite indie creators, learn inside tips, network, and promote your work. The link for each week's show is pinned on Twitter atop @VoiceOfIndie. And you can receive the link every Wednesday morning in your inbox by subscribing to our newsletter at freshinkgroup.com. Check out Voice of Indie every Wednesday on Blog Talk Radio and catch hundreds of episodes archived everywhere from our websites to our YouTube channel and Spotify.
And we're back.
Welcome back. Here, let's put the website up the email up so people can...
A little easier to read there.
Yeah. And so that if they're watching, they can enter this contest. So the other question that I wanted to ask you earlier, which this is the one that you thought I was going to ask when I talked about the hero's journey. You know what a plotter is and a pantser, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are you a plotter or a pantser or a hybrid?
I'd say I'm a hybrid because in the last 2 novels, I've had the ending come fairly soon to me. I knew how the ending was going to develop. So in that regard, I have a point of orientation to work towards, but I don't sit down and write a chapter synopsis and then go and flesh it out. I am just seeing where it takes me, being open to change. I think any style can work for whatever author, but I like, a lot of people have recently read A Swim in the Pond in the Rain by Saunders. It's an interesting book for writers. I think it's great. And, he makes these comments about listening to the text, listening to what's there, because I think the subconscious is such a beast. There's so much going on. There's things that behind the scenes are trying to be linked up. And I used to think this would sound dramatic, but really the text is almost trying to speak to you, and there's something there to connect, that there's more parallels that I can write in if I'm listening to it. And I think for me, that's better than having it all planned out from the beginning. So it is a hybrid. And sometimes I'll just stop and go down the road a bit because there is a scene I can see so clearly that I just want to write, because it's just, some of those flow states that they come out easily and they're fun to write because you're immersed in it. So I do a bit of both.
Yeah, we really think, and a lot of the authors that we've had on here feel that the characters really take you on your journey through the book. I mean, they will go places that you did not intend to go.
Definitely.
And all of a sudden you find yourself there. And I think that's probably what Saunders is talking about. The same thing, but in different words. He was saying the text, and I guess we feel like our characters are real. So
yeah, I'm constantly asking, what does the character want? What's in their way? And the story, I start writing it most easily when I really know who the character is. And at the start,
yes,
part of the hurdles are not entirely knowing the character all that well, because you're still building this person out in your mind. And I think that's why Immortal North 2 flowed pretty easily, because I already knew who a lot of the characters were. And so with their personalities are fairly well set, then it's bring about the circumstance, but you kind of know what you're working with at that point,
Yeah. Right. Well, we have a friend who's an author and has been on our show, and his name is Caleb Pirtle. And he says that whenever you're stuck and you can't move forward, he said it's because you're asking your characters to do something that they wouldn't do. And I think that that's true. If you're trying to fit it in to some place that you wanted to go, and you've already developed these characters, and you do, like you said, in your subconscious, you know who they are, and you know what these people would and wouldn't do. You can't make them go there because it's not natural for them. And of course, that would take the reader right out of the story.
Yeah, that consistency is important. And when you're trying to make someone do something that doesn't seem natural, it's discordant, and it just feels really bad. It doesn't fit. And I think it's important to develop that ear to who your character is and what they've done in the past, and keep that consistency, definitely.
And I think also if you're reading a book or you're watching a movie and it's a character that you know well and that you like, and then for some reason they're doing something that is definitely out of character, it's really annoying because you're like, they wouldn't do that. I mean, a really good example jumps to mind, and that's Luke Skywalker and the way they brought him back and they had him act. It was like, this is ridiculous. This is not who that person was. And so that movie didn't fare very well. No one liked it.
Yeah, I was having this conversation recently with a friend, and I don't know if you know Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy.
No.
It's a pretty dark book, but it's maybe the most beautiful one ever written. So there's this big contrast about it being such harrowing subject matter, but some of the most beautiful prose I've read. And there's a scene near the end where the protagonist, who has just been engaged in pretty violent things, does this thing of kindness, and it really raises the question of, does that still fit with the character? But it's complex because maybe you're putting the character too much in a box. Maybe I'm putting the character too much in a box at that point. There's a chance of the character being saved, or maybe something happened to make him change his viewpoint, but it doesn't seem like it exactly fits. So it kind of makes me wonder.
Yeah. Though, there's a little bit of good in the worst of people and a little bit of bad in the best of people. So I understand what you're saying, if that's what it was. I'm talking about when there's a total character change,
Definitely,
when it's not necessarily good or evil. It's just a total character change of not acting like they normally do.
Oil and water.
Yeah,
pretty
because
much.
If I did something really bad, I'd still be me.
Right.
And everybody knows what I act like and who I am. Like if all of a sudden I was really quiet, people would wonder what's wrong.
What?
Yeah.
What has happened? Aliens.
Joan isn't talking anymore.
Yeah, we're talking. I know we're on the same page. It's like when if a revolver shoots 7 shots out of a 6-shot cartridge, that's the equivalent of the character doing something that they could never possibly do based on what came before. Yeah,
It takes you out of the story.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And I'm the kind of person that listens for those 7 shots and goes, no. I don't like that. I also don't like plots that I can figure out very easily. It's like, give me a challenge, please. I want to be challenged. There was one other thing that you were talking about that I wanted to swing back around to, and you had said that you had some near-death experiences as a bush pilot. What happened?
Well, this one's in my memoir, Under Big-Hearted Skies. One time I was flying up north with a small bush plane. I was by myself. I had dropped off a load of motors to this small outpost camp. There was no one there yet. They were going to come in a few days. And it was a beautiful morning, calm. I went through my mental checklist of what to do with the plane, put the flaps down, bring the rudders up, undercarriage, all these things. Went to take off. The plane started building speed. It was getting really fast. It was screaming down the lake. And this is a powerful plane motor for its size. It's turbocharged. Like that plane almost went vertical when I was empty by myself. It would just take off quickly. And this time it wasn't lifting from the water. And the force was getting closer and closer. And I've flown this plane off the water a couple hundred times. It always goes. So I'm just thinking it'll go. I'll just give it another second, another 10 seconds. And the force is getting closer and closer. And in my mind that morning, I flipped a coin. I easily could have let it keep going because it's going to lift, because it always does. Or I could pull power and slow down and start over. And in that moment, looking back, you should always pull power and start over, because I wasn't in a rush. What does it matter? But in that moment, it was so casual. I pretty much flipped a mental coin. I pulled power to slow down. The plane did not slow down. It had built so much speed and kept going. I see these huge granite rocks, these huge unforgiving pine trees. I'm just staring at them as they're closing. It's so interesting how quickly the mind moves in those moments. And I'm thinking, okay, I could try to steer the plane. You can't steer a plane at that speed on the water, but I could try to steer it and it'll flip. And that's probably better than hitting the trees. I might die in the flip. I'm almost certainly going to die if I hit the bush. So I'm rolling that over my head. I decide not to, but I start to steer a little bit to see what it feels like. And I'm a couple hundred feet now from the woods. And all of a sudden, and I still have a lot of speed, all of a sudden I go up on this reef that's underneath the water. By like 6 inches underneath the water is a rock surface that I didn't know was there. I screech, slow down, bang, and I get stuck on this rock reef.
Oh my goodness.
50, 80 feet from the bush. It stops me and I turn the motor off. My heart rate is jacked.
Yeah.
And there's this massive juxtaposition of going from screaming down the lake in the float plane towards the woods to utter silence. You open the door and there's birds chirping and it's beautiful out there. And like this contrast, I try to, as a writer, you get to harness those things and try to write those into stories, not just the literal morning of what happened, but like those contrasts are really interesting. And so I ended up being stuck on that reef. I didn't want to call for help exactly because that's a huge admission that you screwed up majorly. So the 24-year-old ego in me still doesn't quite want to,
you kind of needed help though.
Bite that bullet at that moment. But and so this could be a longer story, but I ended up swimming or like wading. It wasn't that deep to shore. I cut down this. I had a hatchet. I cut down this 20-foot pine, brought it back to the reef, tried to lever the plane off the reef. I thought that was brilliant. It didn't work. So point for like creativity, but it didn't work. In the end, I do call for help. And this is just for crazy fortuitous, that ridiculous, but flying for the same lodge as me, and often the route isn't the same. So flying for the same lodge that I was working for was another bush plane who happens to be flying over this lake at that point in time, which itself is such slim odds.
No kidding.
He comes and sets down, and on his plane, I'm not making this up, were 4 burly moose hunters in hip waders. So, like, you just can't write that. And they anchor the plane. They come over, they get onto the reef with me and help push it on the struts and the wing. I do still use my lever because it just feels cool to use the lever. And we pop it off into the water. Somehow it doesn't sink. The floats are a little banged, but I can't believe there's not gaping holes in them because I ran right up on the rocks.
Yeah. I think so.
It floats. I start it up, fire it up. And the problem was user error. I didn't put down my flaps. I just screwed up in my haste, in my hurry, mental absent-mindedness. I didn't put down my flaps, which helps you lift off the water surface more easily.
Oh my gosh!
This was just user error. So I put them down that time, and I flew off. And man, I was singing to myself. I was so happy to just to be alive. Yeah.
So exactly. Hi, we're here to help you. It's 4 guys.
Yeah. I couldn't believe it.
In waders.
I know. It's
no problem.
Moose hunters in waders.
There you go.
Now, people, moose are not in the water. That
oh my goodness.
Is crazy.
Yeah, it was.
Exciting, though.
Mm-hmm.
So you had another one too, or?
There a few different ones, and sometimes it's seeing another person in a circumstance, a person almost drowning, or one night. So that story was in the Ontario province. But then for some winters, I worked in Alberta on the oil rigs. I was a roughneck, and I was working the night shift, and it was dark. And one of my jobs was just to go around and inspect the different aspects of the rig, just have a look, make sure there's no hydraulics leaking or whatever. It was pretty casual. It was probably like 2 a.m. And so I came down below the big drilling rig. You can open these doors and you can look at it. It's called a stack. And you can see these heavy metal equipments that all connect to each other. And they're sort of like guiding the pipe that drills into the earth. Normally there's nothing to see down there. I opened the doors and it was blowing up with fluid. There was mud. It's called, like, this mud is the name of a drilling liquid that you use to keep any gas that might come from a pocket from upwelling. So you have this heavy liquid mud to keep the gas down. Well, we'd hit a pocket that we didn't know was going to be so big, or the viscosity of the mud was too light, and it was just blowing up this liquid all over the place. And so that's called taking a kick. You're just taking off gas that's not supposed to come up. And you don't know if that gas is going to be poisonous or flammable, right. So I ran out of there up to the drilling room, the driller half asleep because he's just like watching this thing and do its work. We ran down there. There's a big alarm button. He smashed the alarm button. And eventually there's these mechanics that can close in, like electrical mechanics that sort of close in the hole, stop the drilling to close off the gas and keep it down there. The gas that I upwelled wasn't poisonous. I wasn't sure it was going to be flammable, but you assume all gas was. And the process was to vent this gas off to a place called a flare tank. And then, what is so funny is that for all the advanced machinery of this drilling rig, the part of the process is to, once you have that gas trapped, the guy that's the lowest position on the team of on the rig was called a lease hand, and he takes a bucket of sawdust and diesel that's lit on fire, walks it out to the flare tank that hasn't vented the gas yet, throws it over the side. They vent the gas and then blow up, light it on fire, the excess. So there's this guy that has to do this job of carrying the flaming bucket out to the flare tank, which is kind of hilarious that's the process. There's not an ignition switch or something, but he did that. They opened up the vents to allow the gas to bleed off, and there was a small amount of flames, but there wasn't that much more that was coming up. But in that scene, There Will Be Blood. Did you ever see that movie with Daniel Day-Lewis? Oh, it's a beautiful movie. And there's, this happens all the time where oil or gas comes up that's unexpected and just blows apart the equipment and can light on fire. So this was definitely a modern day equivalent of that luckily it wasn't poisonous and there wasn't too much gas down there, but it was exciting for a time.
So the guy that carries the bucket out should never wear a red shirt.
No.
Right? Like
because
on Star Trek?
Star Trek, all the red shirts die.
Red shirt guy that goes down.
Okay.
They always die.
Yeah, his jumpsuit was orange, so it was close to red.
Close. But he was
Corey was his name. He made it back.
Yeah. Well, hopefully he was wearing,
asbestos gloves.
Gloves that were heat resistant and flame retardant and all of that. That's pretty scary. Oil rigging and mining, I think, they're both really dangerous because of gas.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And just probably more death just from the machinery of it, the connections and the heavy pieces moving around, and really, I almost did myself in from just human error. I'm not accident prone. I've told the story about the flap, so I'm not going around almost killing myself all over the place. But there was human error is just the biggest reason that these mistakes happen, and the oil rigs are ripe with opportunities for that. So I almost made something I couldn't take back again for sure.
You can forget the easiest thing to remember. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
The most critical thing,
Mm-hmm.
It's just like with driving. It's probably our driving accidents are mostly just not paying attention, user error, and text messaging.
Right.
It's the same. Now take that same absent-mindedness and put it in an environment where there's more things to go wrong, like oil rigs and float planes, and it's opportunities for things to not turn out with a happy ending.
I would just like to say, if you're text messaging, you're not driving. That's the problem.
Yes,
definitely.
Driving requires you to be driving. Don't text and drive.
You will go off the road.
Yeah.
No doubt. Or not be able to stop.
Yeah, like I said, this is pre-recorded, but we just got back from like 3 weeks of traveling with our RV, and people are not driving. They're doing other things. They're talking, they're eating,
drifting in their lane all over the place.
And we're in a truck that weighs a ton and pulling in our tag-along trailer that weighs 2.5 tons. So you really don't want to drift in front of us. We will win every time.
Yeah, so please don't.
Yeah.
We don't want that near-death experience.
A mistake a person makes one time.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm afraid so.
So let's talk about your show the people your books again. We have Under Big-Hearted Skies. I can't talk either. And this is Tom Stewart's memoir book. Mm-hmm. And then his novel is Immortal North, which sounds very fascinating.
And has a sequel coming out.
Yeah.
In January of 2023. Be looking for that.
That's right. And you can visit his website, luckydollarmedia.com. And there's all sorts of goodies on there to read and learn about. And you can also find him on Goodreads under Tom Stewart.
Tom_Stewart.
Tom_Stewart.
And his email?
His middle name is underscore.
Yes.
So.
His email is luckydollarmedia@gmail.com.
Right.
You can reach him there.
There you go.
I'm sure he'd like to hear from you.
So any advice for any newbie writers that haven't gotten quite out there yet and brave enough to put the pen to the paper?
It's a challenging process to get readers. And it seems like the blueprint to profitability is a lot of volume. It's writing 3-4 books a year, and spending a lot of time on marketing as well.
Yeah.
It depends what you want. If you just want to write something beautiful or just want to try your hand at it, by all means. If you want commercial success, I think a person has to be prepared to work really hard for that. I'm a big believer in discipline and effort and, deep work. I love that book by Cal Newport, of just training creativity to show up. I don't wait for inspiration to write at midnight or something when I'm feeling like there's words might come. I close the door early in the morning and I sit down and I have the phones in another room and I'm not checking the internet. And you're just working hard at it. So my advice is write what you want to write and take it really seriously. Some people say, not to take yourself too seriously. I think the opposite of that. I take my work really seriously. So that's what I would tell others, to give a lot to it.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you, Tom, for joining us. Excellent work that you're doing there. Mm-hmm. You're a great storyteller. It was fascinating just listening to your stories that you were telling there.
So the novel is going to be good, and so is the memoir, folks.
That's right.
Thank you very much for having me, Rob and Joan. It's a pleasure to be here, and I think the work you guys doing really matters. It matters trying to get books and writing and literature out there, and there's a lot of value to that. So I wish you all success in your efforts.
Yeah,
thank you.
We wish the same to you.
Yes.
We're going to move you over to the side. Stay right where you're at, Tom, until we come back to you. Okay. And we're going to move you over there.
Even at the end of the show. Just hold on for a second. There's a couple of things we needed to clear up with you before you leave.
That's right. So everybody join us next Wednesday, 7 o'clock Eastern time, for CJ Peterson. That'll be on Meet the Author Live, podcast live, episode 83. Do you have anything else that you would like to talk about?
No.
Or no news?
No, I don't think so.
Okay then.
All right.
All right. So I guess then until next time.
That's all, folks.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us here on Meet the Author. Make sure you stay up to date with our show by clicking like, follow, and share. And you can find us on Spotify, iTunes, and more. See you next time on WLFE-DB.com.
You've been listening to WLFE-DB.com, where our shows are your shows.